The Lives of the Saints by Father Alban Butler. January 13th. St. Kentigern, Bishop of Glasgow. This eminent saint of the ancient Church of North Britain was of royal blood among the Picts, or original inhabitants of that country, and born about the year 516. He was placed very young under the discipline of St. Servanus, bishop and abbot of Culros, a monastery situated upon the frith which divides Lothian from Fife. By this holy prelate he was trained up in the perfect spirit of Christian meekness and piety. For his innocence and great virtues he was beloved by his master, and all who were acquainted with that religious family, above all his fellow disciples, for which reason he was called Mungo, or Mungo, which in the language of that country signified one dearly beloved, and this is the name which the Scots usually give him to this day. When he was grown up, by the direction of St. Servanus, he retired to a place called Glasgow, where he led a solitary life in great abstinence, till the clergy and people earnestly demanded him for their bishop. He was consecrated by an Irish bishop, invited over for that purpose, and fixed his see at Glasgow or Glasco, where he assembled a numerous company of religious brethren who formed their rule of life upon the model of the primitive Christians at Jerusalem. The saint's diocese was of vast extent, reaching from sea to sea, and being wild and uncultivated, afforded continual exercise for his zeal and patience. He traveled always on foot, sparing no pains to spread the light of the gospel among the unbelievers, of whom he converted and baptized great numbers. The Pelagian heresy having taken deep root among the Christians in those parts, he so vigorously opposed that fatal growing evil as entirely to banish that hydra out of the church of the Picts. Besides the recital of the whole Psalter, he performed every day several other exercises of devotion, lived in a constant union of his soul with God, and by perpetual abstinence, rigorous fasts, and other extraordinary austerities, he made his whole life an uninterrupted course of penance. Every Lent he retired from the sight and conversation of men into some desert to hold a close communication with God in solitude. As both in his virtues and labors he imitated the apostles, so God was pleased to authorize his preaching by conferring on him an apostolic grace of the miraculous powers. Out of his monks and disciples he sent many missionaries to preach the faith in the north of Scotland, in the Isles of Orkney, in Norway and Iceland. The form of government among the Strathclyde Britons and the Cumbrians, the latter inhabiting the country from the Picts' Wall to the Ribble in Lancashire, was in part aristocratical, for many petty lords or princes enjoyed so great authority in their respective territories as often to wage war among themselves, yet they all obeyed one monarch who usually resided at Alcloyd or Dunbritain. Besides the feuds and quarrels of particular chieftains and their clans, there happened about that time several revolutions in the monarchy. We learn from the book entitled The Triads that when St. Kentigern was made Bishop of Glasgow, Gurthmil Wledig was king of the North Britons, and contemporary with Arthur. He was succeeded by Ridderk, surnamed Hale, that is the Liberal, who vanquished his enemies and rivals in war, especially by the great victory of Ardoreth in 577. He was a religious and deserving prince, and his magnificence, generosity, and other virtues are extolled by the ancient author of the Triades, by Merlin, Taliesin, the Old Laws of the Britons, and the authors of the Lives of St. Kentigern and St. Asaph. This prince, however, was afterwards obliged by rebellious subjects under Morkant Mar, and Eadin, surnamed Uredog, or the Treacherous, to fly into Ireland. The impious Morkant, as he is styled in the fragment of St. Asaph's life, extant in Coke Asaph, usurped the throne of the Strathclyde Britons. But the Cumbrians, who dwelt on the south side of the wall, were protected by Urien, lord of Rhaeged, a nobleman who had lived at the court of King Arthur, and whose great qualities are celebrated by the pens of Lowark Hen, his cousin german, Taliesin, and the author of the Triads. In the beginning of the usurpation of Morkant Mar, St. Kentigern was obliged to fly into Wales, where he stayed some time with St. David at Menevia till Cathwellyn, uncle to King Maelgwn Gwynedd, a religious prince of Par of Denbighshire, bestowed on him the land at the meeting of the rivers Elwy and Clwyd, on which he built a famous monastery and school, called from the river Elwy, Llanelwy, or absolutely Elgwy, where a great number of disciples and scholars soon put themselves under his direction. St. Kentigern was here when St. David died, in 546, or rather in 544, when the 1st of March fell on a Tuesday. After the death of the usurper Morcant, Rideric returned from Ireland and recovered his crown, and St. Kentigern, leaving his school to the care of St. Asaph, whose name the town, which was raised at Llanelwy, bears to this day, went back to Glasgow, taking with him several hundreds of his scholars, their number having probably been much increased after the death of Daniel, Bishop of Bangor, which happened between the years 542 and 545. The return of St. Kentigern to his see is generally placed about the year 560, nor can it be placed later, since in 565 he had a conference with St. Columba when that holy man came over to Scotland in order to convert the northern Picts, to whom St. Kentigern had already sent missionaries. Wharton therefore justly places the residence of St. Kentigern in Wales from the year 543 to 560. King Rideric powerfully seconded the zeal of our saint in all his undertakings, being his constant friend and protector, as were the two princes who afterwards succeeded him, Gwalach, who seems to have been his son, and Morcant Mwynfon, who was certainly his brother. The valor of Rideric and these two successors, which is highly commended by an ancient author in Nennius and other British historians, was the bulwark of their dominions against the inroads of the Saxons. St. Kentigern employed his zeal all this time, with wonderful success, in correcting abuses, reforming the manners of his flock, and propagating the faith, was favored with a wonderful gift of miracles, and died in 601, aged 85 years. His tomb, in his titular church at Glasgow, was famous for miracles, and his name was always most illustrious in the Scottish calendars.